Hi, and welcome to our fifth annual Black Women in Media Conference Awards ceremony. My name is Priscilla Sinville, and I have the opportunity to host our Law and Politics panel. Thank you so much for coming in. This year has been an amazing year, a year of first, and a historical year for many reasons. Not to mention, we elected our first Black woman to the vice president position in the United States, Kamala Harris. So with the election, one of the things that we wanted to focus on is Black women and their role in its role in politics, her role in politics. And tonight I have the wonderful opportunity to moderate a panel with three distinguished women who they're well experienced and able to speak on this topic. So with no further ado, let me introduce our panelists. Our first is Rita Joseph. Rita is a Brooklyn Public School teacher with a rich background in service, advocacy, and activism. Rita, with her deep roots in the community, now she's running to represent the 40th City Council District. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you.
We also have Karen Andre. Karen Andre is a former White House liaison in the Obama administration. She worked as a senior advisor in the Biden-Harris campaign. Thank you so much, Karen. Welcome.
Thank you.
And our third panelist, definitely not least, Joanna LeBlanc. She's a national security law and forest policy expert. Joanna has been a senior advisor for foreign government. Thank you so much, Joanna. Welcome, ladies. So this year has been, like I stated, one for the books. The role of Black women has been on the front line. We have seen her, we have heard her. And I know each one of you have also experienced the importance or know the importance of Black women in politics. And Joanna, I would like to start with you to discuss the role of what does it mean to be a Black woman who's on the front line in politics?
First and foremost, I'd like to say thank you for having me on and to be a part of this amazing conference. But back to your question, I think that historically women have been left out at the table when it comes to politics. And that is a global phenomenon, not just here in America. In particular, when I look at the area of national security and foreign policy, prior to the work that I do currently, I was a legal monitor where I would travel to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and monitor legal proceedings of detainees who've been accused of war crimes and provided recommendations to ensure that those proceedings were fair and transparent. And what I can tell you in that role is there weren't too many women, in particular women like myself. I was always one of the very few ones. And I think that is very problematic because women's makeup of the population should be a representation of the government. When you look at the number of women who are in politics or who serve in senior level positions all across the globe, it is highly problematic. And I think that generally when you're not at the table, you're probably on the menu. So by not having women at the table, oftentimes it means issues impacting women are not being discussed, and policy proposals are not being presented. Which is why I think we have to do a better job at recruiting women to serve in specific roles, and we have to be very intentional about it. We can't just wait for folks to apply and hopefully they'll be qualified, like we always say. But we have to essentially create a pipeline and say that for the year 2020, for example, we want to recruit X amount of women to be in politics or to run for office. Because to have a society that is more fair, that is more just, the government must represent the population. And I think right now it is a challenge. I think that in the House of Representatives, they've made some strides there. I think the Republican Party has had a number of women elected into office, which is a good step forward, regardless of their position. Sometimes we're like, folks who have certain ideologies, but I think at the end of the day, what matters is that you have women at the table, and you hope that the women are progressive or in a certain way sometimes. But I think ultimately we need women from all backgrounds, whether you're Republican, you're progressive, you're a Democrat. Whether you're a Muslim, you're from the Caribbean, you're from the African continent, or you're from right here in America, you're white. You need all of those women to be at the table to influence domestic and foreign policies that will have an impact on the greater population.
And I'm glad that you mentioned about being at the seat and needing women to be at the seat, because that's really what we strive as women, especially the women who have now put themselves in front of the in the world that we're seeing them, like Stacey Abrams, is we have an effect once we put our minds to it. And I know, Rita, you have made a decision to be in politics and to run for office. And what exactly led you to take that initiative and say, you know what, I can be that voice?
The work that I've been doing, the advocacy, the partnership with other elected officials, and the work that I've been doing. And I said, you know what, this year I'm going to run for city council in the 40th Council District in Brooklyn, New York, to represent exactly what Joanne said, women. And I was endorsed by an organization called 21 and 21. And their goal next year, is to elect 21 women into city council. By 2021, there will only be 5 city council members that are women in a body of 51. That's not representation. And representation does matter, like Joanne said. It does matter. So I'm one of those women that was endorsed to run. I got endorsed by this organization, so I'm running. It's hard, as we all know. Of course, some of my male counterparts would love for me to drop out the race, but I said this sister didn't come to play; she came to win.
Yes, and one of the things I love is that you didn't just say that, you know what, I see there's a need and I need to fulfill it, but you pretty much are going against all the odds and pushing forth, and I love that. And Karen, if you could discuss a little bit more, what is it that you see the role of Black women and how important the role of Black women in politics today? I mean, you actually worked on a campaign that led to the first Black woman being elected vice president. Address that, and how did that work on that campaign, the importance of that for you?
Sure. In Democratic now, we are recognizing and acknowledging that Black women are the backbone of the Democratic Party. We have saved elections for the last at least 4 cycles, local, state, and federal. And it is no anomaly that Vice President-elect Harris is our Vice President-elect. And it did not happen in a vacuum. Black women worked, campaigned, mobilized, one, to hold Vice President Biden accountable to his word that he said during the primary that he was going to nominate a woman as his VP, and then to advocate strongly, given the fact that Black women typically turn out at a rate in the 90th percentile for every election and save America from itself every time, that it would only be right that a Black woman be in heavy consideration among other candidates to be considered for VP. And as you said, he made the best choice. He made an electrifying choice. He made a choice of a woman who will be ready to stand by his side and enter the Oval Office in the White House and be ready to work without a learning curve, without a steep learning curve on day one, because with all that's left to undo right now, we don't have a time to have a team that is inexperienced. And obviously, with Joe Biden being in office over 40 years and Senator Harris having the considerable executive experience she has, she's the right person for the job. Not to say that any of the other people in consideration weren't, but she certainly brings everything needed to the table to move us forward. But beyond that lobbying that Black women did and campaigning, and Black women in high positions of power and authority across the government and across the US, is the fact that the campaign made sure that Black women were in leadership. I'm the first Black woman to be a senior advisor of a presidential in the state of Florida. No one can name who the senior advisors were before, because they were white men that nobody knew on the ground, nobody in the grassroots can point to, that didn't circle back to make sure that everyone from the elder in the church to the church mother to the young brother who's on the corner had a place and a seat at the table in the campaign. And that's what happens when you bring women into the fold, particularly Black women. We bring the whole community with us. And that's the power we bring. And that's what the power of women's leadership in everything that we do. And so Black women were in leadership in Florida. The state director in North Carolina was a beautiful, strong Black woman. The state director in Georgia that we finally flipped blue after 3 cycles. Obama's been trying to do it since 2008. Black woman. Black leadership in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin and Michigan. And so wherever you saw tremendous success on this campaign, a Black woman was either in charge or high on the totem pole. And so we serve, and when we do, we bring everyone with us. So that's the power of our magic. We don't only open the door, we're all Harriets. We all bring everybody with us whenever we enter the room. So everybody does well when we step into the room.
And I am so glad that you mentioned that. It is the power of Black women's magic. But that magic, we've actually worked really hard for it. There's a lot of obstacles that we have had to encounter, to overcome. For every face that you see before you, there's probably 1,000 that's not seen behind the scene. And I know that ladies have probably encountered different obstacles in your walk in politics, or even your strive to get into politics. So Karen, if you could address, you being the senior advisor, what kind of obstacles did you encounter that you can assist and give some light to that Black woman who wants to go into politics would encounter, and how do you overcome it?
Sure. I won't obstacles, I'll say challenges, right? Some of them are self-imposed, and then some of them are obviously stepping in the terrain onto the boys' club, right? Law, government, politics, all traditional boys' club. And obviously we're changing that rapidly, but that change still meets some resistance, conscious or unconscious. So one of the things, I think this is universal, it's not just a woman's thing, it's a human thing, but everyone experiences some level of imposter syndrome, right? So whether you're the junior staffer starting your first day on the job, or you're the senior advisor starting your first day on the job as senior advisor, there's some level of self-doubt that may creep in. Sure. And we live in a society that encourages that self-doubt, because again, if all you've seen before you is white men inhabiting this space, you're wondering how you're going to be seen, whether your voice is going to be respected, whether you can cut the mustard. But I reminded myself daily, to your point, of all that we've overcome in this country, all that we've overcome as a people, all that we've overcome as women. And I literally envision myself walking in with 1 million ancestors behind me. And it gives me great strength and motivation, not only to do well for me, but to do well and honor them and their sacrifices. And I remind myself that no challenge that I'm facing today is greater than what they have faced and laid their lives down for me yesterday. So that gives me strength to overcome imposter syndrome. Secondly, I remind myself to walk in there with the confidence of a mediocre white male, because we know that there are so many people in positions of power right now that got it because of privilege, that got it because of connections. We saw the scandal with these celebrities basically paying for their children to be entered into Ivy League schools. And that is much more prevalent than we know. Those of us who reach any of these rooms got it by fighting, scratching, clawing. Nothing was handed to us. So when we walk in the room, I remind myself that nobody's doing me a favor. No one is handing out, a give me. I earned it. And so that's some of the ways I overcome imposter syndrome. And then the other thing that was a challenge, again, it may be self-imposed, is owning my full voice, right? And not shrinking. As women, that's a challenge we have, because we want to stay away from the tropes and the syndromes, the angry Black woman, the this, the that. And I pushed those aside, particularly for this cycle, because there was way too much at stake, right? If I shrunk in a critical moment in sharing some information or insisting we go in a different direction, that could have a domino effect that can impact the election. And we could not face the possibility of losing this election. So I had to push forward, even when I was uncomfortable, even when I knew what I was going to insist on might cause eye rolling amongst my male colleagues or my non-Wakandan colleagues. I had to trust my gut, and I had to own my voice and push forward past my discomfort and push forward past their discomfort. Because what I kept remembering is that feeling in 2018, as we stood there the night that Andrew Gillum had to concede, there were times when I remember shrinking and not pushing forward on some things that I regretted. And I told myself in any other cycle I would work that I would never shrink and not own my full voice and speak up, because it might have some irreparable damage. And so, and nor did I, and I told the campaign manager, the national campaign manager on a call, that I don't want to look back and on November 4th and feel like there's something I failed to do or something I failed to say that could have made a difference. So bear with me as I insist on this point I'm about to make. And she understood. She understood. And so I think getting over imposter syndrome, not shrinking, owning your own voice. And then I think the other thing, one of the small things that I saw was people butchering my title, right? Senior advisor is 2 words, but people will call it a chief consultant, and things that just kind of minimize it. Or a couple of people are like, senior advisor for South Florida. No, I'm sorry, I'm senior advisor for the whole state of Florida, one of the first and biggest battleground states. I'm going to own the power of this position. I'm going to own the responsibility, and you're going to own honoring it, because if my name was Bob, it wouldn't be so hard for you to reconcile senior advisor and the role and the responsibility that comes with it. So old Karen would have been like, oh, I don't want to look braggadocious. But again, remembering that I'm walking in the hallways that have never been walked before. And so there's no reason why I should shrink in any way and allow anybody to minimize the significance of this moment. And so when I corrected people very politely, right? Sometimes it was our own people, sometimes it was our own men. Sometimes I had to redirect people from calling me pet names and sweetie and this and what have you. And so those are minor things, but really I think the biggest lesson for me was owning my voice and making sure that I have no regret at the end of the day, that I did everything in my power to make sure my job was well done.
Yes, and your job was very much well done. I love what you said about owning your own voice. And one of the things I wanted to definitely speak to you, Rita, about is you're owning a voice in a space that's completely different from what you know. And I want you to address that. How did you pivot into that role? How did you find your voice, or even find the funding for your voice? And those obstacles or challenges what have you done to overcome them, or what would you suggest you want to do to overcome them?
Well, like I mentioned, I always say in this conversation, education is politics. So everything I ever wanted to get from my students to make sure that I provided what I want, access and equity for all of these students, was to deal with elected officials. So I started dealing with elected officials. I told you, when I wanted to make sure my kids had access to 3D printers, I wrote the grant, I got funded. When I wanted to have my coding, I wrote the grant and I got funded. I wanted a new Mac lab for my kids, because I know when they go home and the district that I'm going to represent has a digital divide where 25% of my students have no access to devices or internet. I wrote the grant and I got funded. And I said, this is how you do it. This is what I'm going to pivot off of this platform that I've been working on to extend myself and to run for city council. I've always had a voice and I had to find it. That's what it was. The voice was always there. I was always kicking. The first time around, I wanted to run. I was like, no, there was a better candidate. I pulled back. I said, I will support you instead. I didn't run. But this time around, I came full force and I said, I'm running because I have the experience. I know the community. I know what's needed, and I will do a great job in representing all those women that when you make decisions about childcare, there should be women at the table, never women. Education, childcare, healthcare. A lot of the women that are dying in my district with infant mortality, it's 12 times the highest rate. I'm beginning to think, when I'm looking at the stats, that I'm living in a third world country. And I know that I'm not. So my experience will bring it. And of course, women, we lead with compassion and empathy wherever we are. Like Karen said, I don't go into a room and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm here. Look at me. I go and I'm like, oh, why my sisters are not here? I go and find my sisters and I bring them to the room. So I want to work. So this campaign is the people's campaign. And the fact that I'm able to, the community knows and trusts me. I can't wait. I'm excited and nervous, but excited at the same time. Like you said, I'm doing this for my community, my grandparents, who had the nerve to dream to come to America as older people and bring me along. I'm their American dreams. And when I look at the community that I plan to represent, I am them, they are me. When they see me, they're going to see themselves, they're going to see their children. So that's where I'm at. So I found the voice and I'm using it now more than ever. I'm going to walk around with a bullhorn in my purse.
And we do have to use our voice and let it be known that we are in the room, we're capable, our experience. And I love the fact that you use your experience to push you forward. And Joanna, one of the things I wanted to address is when you have the title of an expert and you're a Black woman that comes in the room first, are you the one that they think of when they say that the national security and of law and foreign policy experts coming into the room? Usually it's not the case. You don't expect a Black woman to walk in. How do you address that, showing up in spaces where you may not be welcome, you may not be even thought of? Showing the space and with that knowledge and experience and being able to find your voice and express your voice.
Yeah, first and foremost, I think that education is incredibly important. I believe in the idea that when preparation meets opportunity, it's a beautiful marriage.
Yeah.
But in that preparation requires for you sometimes to go get a degree in something. For me, it was I went to law school. I've always wanted to be a lawyer ever since I was little. And I knew some of the things that I wanted to accomplish in life required that I hold a law degree. So you have to prepare yourself. You can't just anticipate that opportunity is going to fall in your lap. And opportunities may come, but when you're not prepared, you can't really take advantage of them. So I think first and foremost, you have to do your research, right? Get educated. Whatever area that you are interested in, it could be politics, it could be pharmacy, it could be foreign policy, whatever the space may be. Educate yourself as much as you can. And it requires you to read a lot. I know with the day of social media, a whole lot of folks, they'll read a meme and that's it. A lot of times things are not that simple. They're a lot more nuanced than a meme. You read. And if you don't have time to read, there are podcasts that you have to listen to. So for me, as a foreign policy expert, as someone who's on television all the time, all across the African continent, giving feedback on some of the foreign policies here in America and the implication they can have on various countries and governments across the African continent, it requires me to be constantly learning and connecting with people who know more than I do, right? I always say this, if the people that you're in the room with, you can't learn from them, you can't grow from, you're probably in the wrong room. And most of my friends are smarter than me, they have more money than I do, they're more exposed than I am. And that is very intentional because I want people to teach me, and hopefully I'll be able to teach them as well. And second, for me, I'm the first person in my family to do any of this. When I try to explain to my family what I do, they're like, they still don't get it. They just look at me like their little hero, their little celebrity, and I'm like, well, not quite, but thank you. So for me, I don't only represent Joanna, I represent an entire village, and my village is Haiti. And other communities that I've lived in. And I have to do that with grace, with professionalism, with elegance. And I have to speak well, and I have to be knowledgeable. So that's important to me. And another thing, I read this quote the other day, and it says, sometimes when you have to prove who you are, to prove that you are the best, it's an insult. Especially when you have to prove yourself to people who may not even have your credentials sometimes, right? And that quote said something to me because I think as Black women, we always feel the need to prove that we are the best. For example, I had a meeting with the Taiwanese government recently, and we were talking about some foreign policies. And somehow in that conversation, I told them that I had a law degree. Why did that matter? And I realized that it's because I needed them to know that I was the best in the room. But guess what? White men are not doing that. Other people are not doing that. So I think it's something that we have in our mindset. And I think because of how society is structured too, because society tells you, like Karen said, with her title, how people try to diminish it, right? Because she's a woman and a Black woman at that. People don't always give you the credit that you deserve as a woman of color. So you constantly feel the need to prove yourself, which is why I told the folks that I had a law degree, which was probably not even relevant, right? So things like this. So be confident in who you are and also in what you bring to the table, and understand that, yes, you may be smarter than I am, but guess what? You can never analyze this case the way that I can analyze it. There is no situation that you can bring to me that anybody, I don't care who you are, can analyze and dissect in the manner in which that I can. So you have to own who you are, in spite of the challenges, and be confident in your God-given talents, and go after what you want. Because I do believe in the idea that there is nothing that you can't achieve. The idea of something being impossible is absurd to me. I don't think anything is impossible. Whatever you want to achieve, it's definitely doable. But as a woman of color, you do have to take the necessary steps to prepare yourself, because society is not always going to hand you things. In most cases, when you see someone like Karen as a senior advisor, that means she's the absolute best. That's why she was selected. Because mediocre Black women, we don't end up in spaces when you're
There's
mediocre.
no space for us.
When you see a Black person, a Black woman, or a Black man in certain positions, give them the respect that they deserve, because being a mediocre Black person in this world will not open doors for you. So when you are in the room and you're sitting around people who have, X amount of credentials, and so on, who may appear to be smarter than you are, but know that you are there because you belong there, and speak up and be authentic in who you are. And ultimately, things will always work out in the end.
Yes,
and
and
you start to normalize people being used to seeing you and people like you in the room.
Exactly.
And
one last thing, like Karen said this earlier, sometimes, you are in a space with, people are there because of their last names. And I deal with this all the time. And you know what? When I walk in those rooms, I say, I am better than you, because I'm not here because of my last name. I'm here because of merits, because of my hard work. So you can't compare yourself to me. You are here because your last name opened the door for you. And oftentimes when the last names open the door for you, you don't have to do anything to keep it. You just have to just show up sometimes, if you even do that. So know that you've worked hard. You are where you are because you deserve it. And walk in your purpose, and don't let anybody dim your light.
yes, and I really love that, because we shouldn't let anyone dim our lights. I mean, we have so much to give, and so much passion, so much hard work. And I know that there are so many people out there, especially seeing the positive changes that we have made, that want to get into the world of politics, that want to be effective, be an actual change vehicle for racial and social injustice. If you could give us one concrete, and we could start with you, Rita, one concrete step a person can take that wants to, go into the world of politics, or even become an advocate, what concrete steps can a person take to go on that journey?
One of the things I've always advised my neighbors, my friends, and family: get involved in your community board. That could be the lowest level where you start. Get involved in who picks up your garbage on your block. Why isn't the pothole fixed when you needed it fixed? Why is your child's school open and closed at this time? If you're still on a school leadership team, you could work on the budget. You can figure out what kind of after school you can have. The community boards dictate what building goes up, what building go down, what type of things they bring to your neighborhood, the resources. Those are the voices. If you just want to wet your feet and see, you know what, let me see what this is about. Those are all little things that you can use to make changes. For example, I sit on the school board at the school to make sure that resources are coming in, make sure that, and I invite other parents that might be afraid. Sometimes that people get afraid of institutions. They see institutions and they get intimidated. They're like, oh, I don't want to go in. This is not for me. Just as you said, a lot of the women that, no, I'm like, come and join the PTA. Have a voice in your child's education, in their after school. This is one place, because this is the place that's laying the foundation for your child in the future. Get involved. Lay your voice out. Usually they're like, no, I don't have time. I said, they will create the time. If you tell them the time that you're available, they will create it. Come and join your fellow parents and make change. And the change could start in the school, and it bubbles out into the neighborhood, into various different projects. And that's one way young people can get involved in politics too. It's education. To me, has always been politics. How we get our resources, inequities, always has to do with politics. how we get our funding, how classroom size, a lot of the stuff is, and I'm so happy now. My first lady is an educator. She gets me. She understands my needs. And I don't want my students to just survive. I want them to thrive. That's always been my mission and my goal.
Yes. And Joanna, and I love that. Joanna, I wanted to ask you, as far as if someone wants to pivot into the world of foreign policies, what concrete step can a person take to pivot into that role?
So, first and foremost, for me, I can tell you this. When I went to law school, I wanted to, once I graduated, I was going to open up a law firm and practice immigration law, because that was the extent that I was exposed to. Then I became exposed to a whole world, right? When I was in law school, I did a number of fellowships in South Africa, in Ghana, Malawi, and even after I graduated, I did some post-law school fellowships in Africa. And I became fascinated with the world. And when I was in those countries, I was always focused on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which would be equivalent to our Secretary of State. Yes, the Department of State, rather, which would be equivalent to the Department of State. And I always wanted to see how are the U.S. foreign policies impacting those countries, and also what about the foreign assistance? Where does it go? How is it being utilized? I just became really fascinated, and I came back, and I went to law school in Indiana, and I came back to Indiana after my fellowships. Indiana was too small for me, and I could not live in Indiana anymore. I packed up my bags, I took a leap of faith, and I moved to DC. So for me, it was about seeing a vision and having a vision rather, not even knowing how it was going to materialize. Like, I had no idea how that was going to work out. I had never been to DC at that time, ever in my entire life. I had only seen DC on television, right? So thankfully I had a mentor, and part of your process is developing mentors, and meeting people who see the goodness in you and who see your potential, and who could potentially open doors for you, even create opportunities sometimes. So when I decided to move here, my mentor owned condos, and she said, well, you can just stay at my condo until you find a job, and then you can either stay here, start paying me some rent, or you can just go somewhere else. So because I had a mentor, I was able to move, because if it were not for her, my family didn't have any money, and I had no more refund checks coming in. So I would not have been able to take that leap of faith. So one, having a vision, and two, having mentors, people around you who can support you in the journey. And three, being open. So when I moved here, I happened to be at the grocery store one day, and my former law professor saw me, and he said, "What are you doing?" And at the time, I think I was doing some contract work. He said, "I have a project in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Would you be interested?" I said, "Would I?" Absolutely, because I'm thinking about long term. Guantanamo Bay, Cuba on my resume as a Black woman, that is a big deal. So again, just being open to opportunities. Took that gig, lasted a bit longer than I was expecting it to have lasted, and then I was recruited by an ambassador in my current role. Again, being open to opportunities, and I think a lot of times we look at the money, we're like, okay, it doesn't really pay me what I think I deserve. But you have to look at the big picture. If you can afford to not live a lavish lifestyle right now, or you can afford to not take the absolute best salary, get the experience that you need. I get sick and tired of microwave success. It doesn't work like that. Success takes time. It takes a lot of setbacks, a lot of tears, right? But if you're willing to put in the work, I can guarantee you it will work out. It always does. So three, just being open to opportunities and being open to learning the craft. Because you cannot be incompetent to talk about Black girl magic. We need our Black girl magic to be smart, to be beautiful, right? That is the makeup of Black girl magic. Not just being pretty, posting beautiful pictures on Instagram. Are you competent? Competence is incredibly important, because I can assure you, if Rita was incompetent, she wouldn't be where she's at. If Karen was not competent, she would not be where she's at, having made history. Competence is incredibly important. Take the time to learn the craft. Yes, there will be obstacles, there will be challenges along the way, but I can guarantee you, my sisters, if you hang on in there, in due season, you shall reap the fruits of your labor.
Yes. So far we've heard learn the craft. Take the time to learn the craft. Get involved at the local level and on the school boards, or any local level. We would like to ask you, Karen, please, what can you add as a concrete step if someone wants to get into the world of politics, or even work on a campaign, hopefully in the future? What concrete step can a person make to get into on that journey?
Sure. Wet your feet. You should volunteer. It's a way to keep your job or keep whatever you have steady, but also get exposure. And there's nothing like volunteering, because volunteers are part of the lifeblood of any campaign. It's typically most candidates have volunteers that are their immediate friends and family. And so if you find someone who you like, who you want to support, or an organization that's doing work that you like and want to support, volunteering is a safe way to get exposed, but without having the responsibility of making decisions and fixing problems, and being able to pick and choose the time and the effort level that you can contribute. It's on your basis, right? So that's a very safe way to start to get your feet wet and learn the beginnings of this new environment, because every new room you step into has its own lexicon. It's its own ecosystem. It has its own players, and it takes real time to learn the very levels of playing. Even in my 4th presidential cycle, my 20th plus year in politics, I learned new and different lessons this cycle than I ever had, or that I would have had I not taken this role. So as they say in the urban parlance, there's levels to this, right? So entering at the volunteer level allows you to get a very safe bird's eye view and be that fly on the wall. Then if you're a student, the volunteer version of that would be interning. But I would say if you're beyond that and you're like a Rita and you really want to get in there, I say do 2 things. One, own a lane, meaning own the lane of the type of work that you want to do. And I'll give you a great example. Stacey Abrams, okay? We're looking at her today and giving her credit for the work that she did in Georgia that helped turn it blue. I can tell you from experience, I was a field organizer in 2008, and remember the Georgia team being deployed elsewhere, because even the Obama team, in the era of hope and change and lightning in the bottle that 2008 was, realized we're not going to flip Georgia. Let's dispatch these people to other states, okay? The same thing happened in 2012. But along comes this woman that's been in public service all her life, and she decided she was going to own a lane. Her lane was voter registration, that she was going to set up an infrastructure and plant seeds over time that would grow to over 800,000 new people registered in her state, that would cause a blue wave in her state. Now that took time. And like Joanna says, it's not overnight. So the seeds we see popping up now in these beautiful results in Georgia were planted 5, maybe 10 years ago, right? Success is not an overnight story. And so she owned a lane. She picked a problem she wanted to solve, and she worked relentlessly on that problem. The first step got her to the governor's mansion. We know that mansion was stolen from her, but that was the first step. She got her ultimate revenge now, and in the county that the beloved John Lewis inhabited, his congressional seat is the county that eventually turned state blue for one President-elect Joe Biden. So I would say either start by volunteering, start by interning, or if you're beyond that and like you really want to get on the playing field, pick a problem that you want to solve. If it's fixing the light at the corner of your street and figuring out which city council person is supposed to work with you on that. If it's, like Rita said, working with your PTA, just pick a small problem, work on that, and then that will feed the appetite for more successes. So own a lane, find a problem to solve, work on it, or come in as an observer, as a volunteer, or as an intern on somebody's campaign or in someone's political office, and allow yourself to organically learn more about the environment. And then that will feed that, those opportunities will lead to other opportunities, and you'll know if this is something that is for you, and you will organically move forward from there.
I love it. Absolutely love it. As far as owning our lane, we've been working the lane for a long time. So it's about time that we actually own it and pursue it and just use our voice to be heard, be part of this, because we're being affected by the change, by all the policies that's being created. So being at the table and affecting change is a wonderful thing. And thank you, ladies, for your work and what you've done and all the information that you provided to us. And thank you. And it's a Law and Politics panel. Thank you.
Thank you.